garage to the property at 210 Lawrence Boulevard. The garage and the driveway and all the impervious surfaces that are proposed exceed the impervious surface maximums allowed within the shoreline overlay zone. And so what we have here is, based off of my calculations, we have about 55.53% of the lot after development would be impermeable surface. And the maximum is 40%. The lot currently has about 34.23%. So when this particular proposal was submitted, it was originally submitted as a building permit. It was determined at that point that it would exceed the impervious surface maximums, and so therefore had to go through a variance process in order to be allowed. The applicant did submit that. He submitted that in time to be at the February 8th Board of Adjustment meeting. He did provide sort of at my request, he did provide some perspective as to why he required this, why it's a difficulty, and sort of answering some of the questions that I myself had to answer as a part of this report, not just for the BOA, but for you all as the council. He made it very clear he believed that a garage is permitted use of the property, that there is a unique circumstance with the excessive amount of right-of-way, which I will touch as a part of this, that the right-of-way creates practical difficulty, which we'll also touch, that there are other properties in the neighborhood that also have excessive amounts of impervious surface, that they very clearly go above that 40% maximum, and that other properties in the neighborhood requested and received variances for very similar projects, adding a garage or for impervious surface. In terms of public comment on this item, we have received a lot of inquiries from the public. A lot of it has been focused on and provided in letters, but it's been generally focused on the proposed garage location, the size of it, as well as the need for a particular garage of that size, the impact on view sheds for adjoining properties and also for the public right-of-way, the increased runoff that would be a part of any additional impervious surface towards the Mississippi River, the removal of more green space and trees along the river, and sort of a lack of details on the design, specifically focused on what the outside of the building would look like. In terms of any additional comments other than that, we have received a few extra things for the March 8th Board of Adjustment meeting, and that was from a nearby neighbor just trying to figure out if there was any additional sort of concerns regarding water runoff, but it's mostly the same stuff that we had been talking about previously. From the DNR, we did initially get sort of a soft comment letter, I would say, in the form of an email, where the DNR did ask about any other ways that Mr. Houston had approached this particular problem of too much impervious surface, whether he had looked at any impermeable paver systems, or if there was some sort of rain barrel, or, some sort of other effort that could be made. When I reached back out to the DNR in order to try to get some sort of official either denial or sort of what I would say approval of the variance before I went to the Board of Adjustment, I still did not get a formal decision on that within the 30-day statute set by Minnesota statutes. And so he actually did attend the March 8th BOA meeting, and he did provide some input, mostly suggesting that when the Board of Adjustment made findings that they should focus on the 5 things, which we'll cover later on. In terms of the February 8th meeting, that was very briefly held. There was a time issue, and we had to start the Planning Commission very shortly after the Board of Adjustments began. So we did not spend a whole lot of time on that, but we did continue the discussion to the March 8th meeting. At the March 8th meeting, the public was given an hour and a half in order to sort of discuss the project and to go through a lot of things. The board discussed a lot of the different issues for the property. There was eventually a vote of 3-1 in favor of granting the variance. And this added a condition to this variance of making all the gutters on the new structure drain to the back of the property rather than to the front of the property, thereby hopefully mitigating some of the issues of more water sort of getting pushed down daily onto Lawrence and into the Mississippi River. The dissenting vote was by Commissioner Burke, stating that the project did not fit with the character of the locality. She was very concerned about the size of the garage and the location of it, and the impact it would be on the neighborhood. In terms of staff findings, I just want to briefly go through this. When staff is looking at a variance, we are making sort of a decision on what is the practical difficulty with this variance. And that is based off of three things, which is the property owner's use of the property in a reasonable manner that is not otherwise permitted. That's the first one. The second is that the plight of the property owner is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. And then the third is if the variance is granted, it will not alter the essential character of the locality. So practical difficulty sort of ends up being the main thing that a variance needs to be. There are other things, but I would say that that is sort of the biggest hurdle that a variance needs to overcome in order to either be approved or they can overcome and be denied. So for the first question, can it be put to a reasonable use if used under conditions allowed by the official control, which goes to particular physical surrounding shape or topographic conditions? Practical difficulty to the owner is distinguished from mere inconvenience. So there's a difference between a mere inconvenience and a practical difficulty. And for this, we don't really agree with the applicant's use of the sort of right away in front of their property between between the house and Lawrence. That is public right away, and so they can't really count that as part of their lot. But we do see a practical difficulty in the shape of the property and the fact that they aren't able to vacate the right of way in front of them, even though they do maintain that, and that has remained sort of green space that will be permeable surfaces. And so we do feel like that they have sort of in a way, maybe some rights to it, and to count that towards some of their decisions when it comes to, in this case, impermeable surfaces. The second one that we're looking at is that the conditions upon which the petition for the variance are based are unique to the property or extraordinary and not created by the landowner and not applicable generally to the property within the same zoning classification. And so because this property is R2, there's a lot of R2 in Wabasha. It's very hard to say that each property is going to be very similar to other properties within Wabasha that are also zoned R2. But I think when you're looking at this particular property, there is a large amount of right-of-way between the house and Lawrence Boulevard, which when you're looking up and down Lawrence Boulevard is not an issue for those adjoining properties. I think in addition to that, there are a lot of adjacent properties that have a lot of excess impervious surface, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later on. So the third thing that we're looking at is whether economic considerations alone, that those cannot constitute a practical difficulty. And in this case, the applicant's argument is not economic based, so that is met. And so when we get to granting of the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality, there's a lot of discussion about this at the Board of Adjustment meeting as to whether the location of the garage can be considered as a part of this variance. I did guide the Board of Adjustment impervious surface. And not necessarily focusing specifically on impervious surface and whether more impervious surface would alter the essential character of the locality, and not any setbacks or any particular size or height of the garage, which weren't and still are not a concern as a part of this particular variance. A lot of these other ones are sort of mostly, I would say, well taken care of. Will it impair adequate display of light and air to adjacent properties? No, it's not expected to do that. If the variance is the minimum necessary variance, we did feel like the staff as well as the Board of Adjustment did feel like it's the minimum necessary variance in order to grant, in order to allow this reasonable use of the property. The other two that I just want to hit on really quick is that is it in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance? Staff did find that it was in harmony with the intent of the ordinance, and this is very strange in some aspects in order to think about it, because the code specifically says do not do this. This is the maximum. However, I think you have to look at what is the when you go back to the beginning of a certain ordinance, there is a purpose and intent behind it. And it's very clear, even within some of the DNR's web pages, that in terms of shoreline, in terms of protecting shoreland with shoreline overlays, it's not to completely remove the ability of someone to develop their property. It's to do it in a way that is a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more helpful for those adjacent water bodies. And in this case, although 55% does sound like a lot, I think when you're looking at the adjacent properties, it's very clear that those adjacent properties are not significantly affecting them, affecting the Mississippi River sort of one by one, and that the general purpose and intent of the ordinance is not to sort of specifically keep someone from developing their property. And so it is in harmony with general purposes and intent of the ordinance. And then the last one is if the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Well, comprehensive plans cover a lot of things, but they don't cover specifically variances for impervious surface. However, when I'm looking through the comprehensive plan, I don't see anything in particular that talks about impermeable surfaces. It does talk about, providing, environmental corridors, which the Mississippi River does, protecting, one of the major tourist draws to Wabasha, which is the river, and access to the river. It doesn't talk a whole lot about impervious surface, and so therefore it's not in conflict with it, and therefore consistent. So in front of you all, there are a few recommended conditions. The first two were a part of the original Board of Adjustments resolution. And so that first one is that the Board of Adjustment granting of a variance shall not be valid for a period longer than 6 months. And that's just very typical for any sort of Board of Adjustment action. There's usually a time limit for that. It can't just be given indefinitely. The second is that the proposed garage back to the existing permeable surfaces back there for the purpose of water management. That was the added condition put there by the Board of Adjustment. This third condition that we're also recommending is that the proposal shall meet all other requirements of the zoning ordinance. That is sort of at the direction of the city attorney, that we make sure that the proposal isn't going to receive this variance and then look for maybe a different variance later on, that it's going to meet all the codes except for this one particular code, which they're asking for variance. So we think that that's pretty reasonable. So there are sample resolutions for both approval and denial. I kind of leave that to the city attorney in order to kind of go through those. But are there any questions currently?
Questions, we can also have a time for questions after we've heard from the appellant. All right, we'll do that. Thank you, Carrie. All right, and so we welcome comments from the appellant and the appellant's counsel. We'd be happy to hear from you if you want to stand at the podium, so we're sure to be able to hear from you.
And we'll note to just put on the record that the council did receive written documentation from the appellant that has already been added to the record.
Well, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to represent my client down in this river town, which I come down to quite often and enjoy it along with many other people from Rochester. My name is Paul Grindy. I'm a lawyer from Rochester, Minnesota. I've been there since 1984. We had an office in St. Charles, and I've did a lot of work, especially when I was younger, down in Wabasha with Judge Weber and some other judges who are no longer here. I represent Tom Ellis, who is the person that owns the property that you may know it. It's a blue house that is a step away from the Jusen home, away from the river. And to counsel's point, the one thing that I wanted to make sure of, and I brought extra copies just in case, but that you do in fact have our summary of our argument, that they have that, and that you have the survey, which apparently Mr. Woodley was involved in, and then you have a number of pictures that we've also provided. So I am not going to give those out again. However, during my presentation, I am going to be specifically asking my client to testify specifically about the pictures. I have talked to Mr. Davis. Is it Davis or Davies? Davis. I have talked to Mr. Davis, and I do have some questions for him, since this is in the nature of a quasi-judicial hearing. Will I be allowed to ask him questions?
Yes, you will at one point. Is that going to be your only fact witness?
No, Mr. Ellis will testify
Also,
too, of course.
Will there be any other fact witnesses?
I don't believe so at this time, other than maybe some cross-examination of Mr. Jusen. If he's here, I understand that he is here.
Okay.
So the first thing that I would like to discuss is that we talked about the initial packet that you have, and we also have talked about the summary of argument and pictures which you have, and those are all part of the record, and those are very important to my client's presentation of this case. It is Mr. Ellis's position that this variance that was granted should not be upheld. Variances are interesting things when they come to land use plans. The plans say you can use your property for these purposes. Variances are something that should not be granted very often. And in this case, when I listen to what Mr. Davis has presented to the board, when I look at what Mr. Jusen has presented to the board, I come away thinking, did the Board of Adjustment really go through the 5-factor or the 6-factor test that controls this situation? And my gut feeling is that they did not. There's an impervious ordinance in place for a reason. As I will ask Mr. Davis to talk about, when I asked him whether or not he was aware that the city of Wabasha incurred costs to fill in the end of Bailey, where it abuts at Lawrence Boulevard, that the city of Wabasha had to dump quite a bit of concrete there to stop the erosion. Why did they do that? Why did the city of Wabasha incur that cost? They incurred that cost because of runoff. And Mr. Davis did not know that. He did not know that that had been done. And I think what he said was that, that wasn't brought to my attention. But my client will testify that that was in fact done. The other matter that Mr. Davis did not know about, did not bring to the attention of the Board of Adjustment, and has not done it to date, is there's an issue with a pool area, which would be behind this outbuilding that's being proposed. And that also may be an impervious surface. My client will testify that he believes that that pool was taken out, but that it in fact wasn't taken out, it was merely filled in. My question to Mr. Davis was, would that be an impervious surface then? And again, his response was, that wasn't brought to my attention. I didn't know about that. And of course, then he didn't bring it to the Board of Adjustment's attention either. The statement that this somehow complies with the overall nature of the neighborhood, if anybody goes and drives around that area, which I'm sure you all do, I did twice today on my way down here. I came down Bailey, took a right on Lawrence Boulevard, took the bend around to Main Street, and then back down to Bailey Avenue. There are no 1,200 square foot Morton buildings there. Now, what I think the Board of Adjustment has been led to believe, and I think what it appears to me that this board is being led to believe, is that, well, this is just about impervious surface. And that's really not that much when it's 12%. But you have to look at these 5 factors. And that's what Mr. Ellis is asking that you do, is take a look at these 5 factors. And if these 6 factors, and if these 6 factors cause you problems, then you should not uphold the granting of this variance. And it doesn't mean that you have to find all 6 in favor of Mr. Ellis. You are going to have to weigh them. You're going to have to decide in your mind which are more important to you when you're making this analysis as to whether or not to uphold this variance. Again, this is a 30 by 40 foot Morton style outbuilding. I believe Mr. Jewson has stated in his submissions that he would park his trailers there. Well, as I understand, Mr. Jewson is a realtor in town. He certainly knows of other areas that he could rent, and this goes to the economic factors, even though he hasn't stated that. He can go rent someplace else to park his trailers. He has a 2-car garage. He has 2 more spaces outside of that 2-car garage. And he is asking to build, like I say, something akin to a Morton building in the middle of a residential area. I noticed something today when I was looking at what the city has put on for this meeting, and it was a list of properties apparently showing that look at all these places that have impervious land. I mean, many of them were 100%. I think, what was included there was things like, and I've eaten down there, what used to be Stacy's, is, commercial properties that don't have any non-impervious land there. That, Stacy's and these other businesses are not in this area of land, Bailey, Lawrence, Main Street. If you go through that area, and again, I did when I came down here today, I didn't see any Morton style buildings there. This is right along the river. This is an area, again, the Rivertown idea of Wabasha is what Wabasha wants people to think of. And then when I wrapped around and came behind those buildings, what did I see? You know, this would be on Main Street. What I saw was that there was a number of garages, but you know, they were normal sized garages. They were, you know, maybe 22 by 24, you know, about 500 square feet. They weren't 1,200 square foot Morton buildings. So even though the issue here is the imperviousness, that there's too much impervious area on this in this lot, the problem is that's not the only thing. You have to look at the 6 things that you have to analyze to determine whether or not the variance should be allowed with regard to that impervious property, impervious nature of the property. The area that this building, this very large building, is going to be placed, and my client will testify to this, is right outside of his kitchen, is right outside of his deck. And you will see, and should have already seen, that this severely occludes his view of the river. There's an area, and I talked to Mr. Davis about this, you know, there's an area between what I guess is considered to be the front of the house, which is very odd, that the house is fronted on Lawrence when the garage and the front door are on Bailey. I have a feeling that that's probably because that its address is probably Lawrence. And I think they follow the address to determine what is the front of the house. And so that makes that, I believe, a 30-foot wide area that you could not build, the right of way that you could not build. If that was changed to a Bailey address, then I believe Mr. Jewson could build his building, you know, right between his house and Lawrence Boulevard. I don't think Mr. Jewson is going to do that. Why not? Because it's going to significantly occlude his view of the lake, of the river. That's important, and it's important for this board to consider my client's rights when it comes to what Mr. Jewson wants to do in order to store his trailers. There are other places, commercial areas of town, where trailers can be stored. I'm sure he knows where they are and probably knows how much it costs to rent those. The analysis of the Board of Adjustment that there is no practical difficulty present, that there is a practical difficulty. The practical difficulty is caused by the size of this building. This building could be moved back. This building could be made smaller. Again, if you go look at that neighborhood, look at the size of the garages, especially along Main Street, behind these houses. These are not the size building that Mr. Jewson is proposing. So this condition is a condition that is caused by Mr. Jewson. The Board of Adjustment also apparently analyzed it and decided that it didn't alter the essential character of the locality. I would say that is just patently not true. There is no building this size, no Morton style building this size in that area. And again, to use the analysis of commercial buildings that are downtown as buildings that have 100% impervious property to somehow use that to bolster the argument of Mr. Jewson is inappropriate in my mind. So The variance, again, variances should be granted rarely. The purpose of the impervious ordinance is there for a purpose. And again, when I talked to Mr. Davis, you know, he didn't know that Wabasha went to the expense of filling in the end of Bailey on the river. And he also didn't know about this pool in the back of Mr. Jewson's land. So in short, at this time, I would ask that that you folks do not uphold this this variance. And I would also now like to call my client, Mr. Tom Ellis, to stand so he could go over some of these pictures with you.
Thank you, Mr. Grindy.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
What is, I'm not an architect, what's a Morton building?
Oh, a mortar building is what you see on farms. You know, post building, I call them. I mean, they're made by other people too, but Morton is probably the best building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ellis, Tom is my neighbor. As I mentioned before, if you'd like to make your comments, you can join us.
Would I like to? Not necessarily.
Well, it's up to you. You certainly can if you'd like to.
Well, did you want me to go through some pictures?
Yes.
So,
Are you able to post those?
Is that on the attachments? I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's on the,
I thought it was on the attachments, but I couldn't find it. Okay,
It's not on the agenda.
That was with the summary argument.
okay.
The April 4th letter.
Yeah, I will get this running again.
I just put it to the top of your inbox. So these photos are entered as evidence to the record. You can see they're documented as such, but they were officially entered at the beginning of the meeting.
all right.
So you want me to go down to the pictures?
He has the picture starting with A in front of him, but now if you could, so that everybody can see those.
Exhibit A.
Yep. Okay, that's a shot taken from my deck, looking towards the river, and that's Houston's house on the right.
And so this is your view from your deck towards the river with Bailey on the left-hand side there, is that correct?
That's right.
And the stop sign is Lawrence.
Yes,
And if this outbuilding was built, would that include your view of?
it totally blocked my view, this view.
And looking at exhibit B, is that a similar picture?
Yes,
And that just shows the same thing, is that right?
yep.
And now when you go to exhibit C, and what is that a picture of?
This is a picture from my kitchen sink window, again, out towards the Mississippi. The Jewson house and tree on the right, and his dock, part of his dock in the front.
And the outbuilding would be across the front of that window, is that correct?
Yeah,
Now going to exhibit D, would you please tell them what that is?
this again is a shot out my kitchen window towards the Mississippi and Jewson's home. And a dock that is parked there. And then on the right-hand side, where the white kind of fence is, on the other side of that is where the old pool used to be.
And exhibit E, that's just another picture out of your kitchen
Yes,
sink window.
yes.
All right, then if you go to exhibit F, Mr. Ellis, could you tell the panel what that is?
This, from my kitchen dining room table, this is a picture out the 3 windows in my dining room towards the river and the Juicing property.
And again, if the outbuilding was built, that again would pretty much block your whole view of the river.
Totally.
And then going to exhibit G. Mr. Ellis,
This is the side view of my house from Bailey Avenue, looking towards Huntoons. And then on the left, you can see the white vinyl fence that screens the area that used to be the pool.
and your home is on the right,
Yeah.
and Bailey Avenue is in the front.
Yes,
And H is basically another picture of that.
yes.
And then looking at exhibit I, could you please tell the board what that is?
Well, this is a shot from down by the Mississippi, looking up past Jason's house and towards my house, the blue one.
And so if that outbuilding was built, then basically you would not be able to see the majority of your house, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to go through, I think you can, I want to go through J, K, L, and M, and specifically looking at K, if we bring that up.
Go back. Okay,
Sorry.
go down. Okay, there's J. Okay,
K, I'm sorry.
K. Okay,
Okay, and then what is that, Mr. Ellis?
Well, you can see the tire in the river. And then the white part, that I believe is cement that the city dumped to try to stop erosion. And then, of course, there's some riprap there.
And then if you look at M, can you go to M? M, please. And is that a little tighter shot of that?
Yeah,
Okay, that's where the concrete was poured in by the city of Wabasha because of erosion.
yes,
And that's immediately, that's between the river and Bailey Avenue, is that correct?
the river, Bailey Avenue and Lawrence Boulevard.
Right, Lawrence, right, exactly. That is all I have for pictures, ma'am. Thank you for doing that. Mr. Ellis, have you talked to anybody about what this size outbuilding would cause to happen to the value of your home?
Yes. I have.
And tell us about that discussion.
Well, I've talked to 3 different realtors and I've talked to one assessor or appraiser. And they've all said that it would decrease the value of my home by at least 25%.
I described during my presentation the area surrounded by Lawrence Boulevard, Main Street, and Bailey Avenue. Is it fair to say that there are no large outbuildings on Lawrence Avenue facing the river? Is that correct?
There's one fairly large garage on the Miller property. I don't know how large it is, but it sits up above the back of Miller's house. There's not a structure, I don't think anybody's view.
And then when you go along Main Street.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's the address of that?
Miller's,
Yeah,
Give me 1 second. I have
it's
it.
2 houses down from Juicing.
Lawrence,
It's a new construction.
Jim Miller's?
Jim,
Okay.
yeah.
All right,
I think
It's
a-
312 Lawrence
Lawrence.
Boulevard East.
okay.
I think it's a pretty modern looking.
Yeah, it's a real modern looking house, a lot of flat.
And then, as you go around and cross over on Main Street, are there any garages the size of this outbuilding being proposed by Mr. Juicin in that area.
The only one that I can think of offhand would be, I think it used to be a type of a carriage house.
So that's our garage. That's 230 Main Street East. That's a new construction.
And it's pretty big,
Yeah, I don't know the height.
2-story. But again, it's not blocking the view of anybody, and it was built as a carriage house.
Well, it was built as a garage, as new
Yeah,
construction
not as a
garage.
storage shed.
It's a 2-car garage.
Yeah. That's the only one I know.
Otherwise, they're pretty regular sized garages.
Yeah,
What do you consider a regular sized garage to be?
a double car garage with maybe a little bit of extra length, so you can have some
It's not on the
storage,
picture.
some extra storage in it.
About what size?
Oh, 22 by 26.
But not 30 by.
No, I don't know why anybody called that a garage.
The pool area, I think we may have already discussed, but that's the area behind the white fence, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what have you heard about what has been done in that pool area?
Oh, it's been filled in.
And do you know, was the pool itself removed?
I do not know that. Sure.
So that could be impervious surface as well. I don't believe I have any more questions of Mr. Ellis, unless Mr. Ellis, you are free to say anything else you'd like to the board.
I guess I'd like to ask some questions of Mr. Gator. I think when I appeared before the board for the first time, which was in February, and it was cut really short because they were closing the meeting to go to another meeting. And I asked you a series of questions then in rather rapid succession that never got answered.
Is that a question?
Well, do you remember the questions and do you have answers to them?
I don't remember the title of this, no.
Okay, who do you work for?
Well, currently I'm working for the city of Wabasha, but I'm contracted by the city of Wabasha as a part of a larger firm called Net.
And quite often you refer to staff. Who are you talking about when you say staff?
Well, it's usually me and Wendy when it comes to matters of the city of Wabasha.
So if, for example, you're gonna determine that the 30 by 40 building is gonna be called a garage, who determines that? It's gonna be called a garage.
Well, actually, the ordinance would state that because it's an accessory building. And I mean, really, the difference between a garage and a storage building is non-existent within code. They're both accessory structures.
Who would determine that?
The ordinance does. The ordinance has a definition for what is and what is not an accessory structure. And in this case, this is an accessory structure because it's a.
So it's not a garage.
It is because it falls within what is an accessory building, but it's determined by the code. It's not called anything else.
Okay. So if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and looks like a duck, it's not a duck.
I
Mr.
think in the interest of
Mr.
time, we have to stick to questions that we can actually answer. So if you can recall any other questions that you have that weren't answered, you can certainly ask those. We also will have a portion of the time where council will ask questions, both of the appellant as well as city staff if needed.
Okay,
Anything further? Okay, all right. All right, so we've heard from the appellant and council. We can have questions from city council for the appellant. Of course, council, you're certainly welcome to resume your place at the podium if that's easier. I can see you. I'm not sure if everybody else can see.
Yeah, we don't have any further presentation at this time.
Sounds good.
To clarify, is there a recording being made of this? And if so, is Mr. Grindy has a very nice voice for a courtroom. And so I assume he can be heard from where he's sitting, but I just wanted to make sure that it was being recorded.
We are
Yeah.
being recorded.
Mhm.
And so I can hear you from here. I'm not sure whether our system is picking you up. I don't know if anybody, you can, yeah. And I'm just not sure if anybody on the site can see you. So you're just welcome to resume to the podium.
All I'm saying is that, I'm
Nothing
sorry,
further.
we don't have any further presentation.
Very good, very good. Members of council, any questions for the appellant or council?
But just a couple points of clarification. You spoke a lot about shed view or view. Do we reserve, there's no reserve right to our view, is there?
No, within our code,
And there's no state law or anything like that.
no.
And when you buy a house with a view, it's kind of buyer beware, right?
I would say generally, yes. I mean, there are situations where what an adjacent property owner does and how that affects another property, that's still something to be decided between this property owners and potentially up to court. But generally, as long as it's within zoning code, the city has no reason to deny someone wanting to do something. The variance for the impervious surface, that's, to me, it is focused primarily on the impervious surface. The location of the garage or the height of the garage, those meet zoning code. Mr. Jewson wanted to place a little storage building there, and it just happened to block the view of Mr. Ellis outside of that kitchen window. I couldn't do anything about it.
Could he park them both there?
May I just interject for 1 second? Dean is with us, and I just want to make sure he can hear. We've had a time shift. We've had an earlier meeting time than in the past, which was 7 o'clock. Dean, can you hear adequately?
I can.
Oh, we have a muting issue here. Okay, Dean, can you speak one more time?
I can hear you.
Okay, and let us know if you can't, for some reason here, we have both appellant and recipient of the variance here, and so we just want to make sure that you and also members of the public can hear. Sorry, John.
It's okay.
Very good, thank you.
So my question is we don't have an ordinance that restricts like parking the boat there alongside the house.
Not that I know of, no.
Remove the 72-hour.
No, that's on the street.
That's on the public street. So it's not on private property.
Yeah, on the street is 72 hours.
But like you could back up the boat, park it in that side yard and leave it there, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
So
May I comment on this?
You may, yes, and we'll just, this will be, okay, please, yes. I think it's best if we just assume you're best heard at the microphone.
Ms. Mayor,
Yes, Dean.
I need to announce that I'm at 218 West Street, Main Street West.
Thank you, Dean.
Again, and this goes to the heart, I mean, that's a good question. This goes to the heart of when I was sitting at the office talking to my staff about what is going on with the variance approval. I used to be on the Homestead County zoning board of adjustment, so I have some familiarity with that. And again, we have something called a variance, and when you are going to use your property for something that is not allowed, no matter what the reason, I think this focus on imperviousness, and that somehow that's all you have to focus on, is incorrect. And I think that the district court or the Court of Appeals is going to so find, because you have to go through these 6 factors. And if you go through these 6 factors, factor number 3 is whether the variance will affect a substantial change in the character of the neighborhood or will be a substantial detriment to neighboring properties. Now, I think what Mr. Davis is telling you is no, if this thing sheds water like crazy, too bad. That doesn't affect any neighboring property. That's an incorrect analysis of the case law and the law itself. They're asking for a variance because the state has said this is too much impervious property. Again, what Mr. Davis wants you to do is put these blinders on and say, oh, okay, that's all we're gonna look at. That's not what you look at. You look at these 6 factors. And the neighboring property, my client's property, is going to be significantly impacted by this. And if Mr. Davis is telling you that any outbuilding, I don't care, Morton building, outbuilding, whatever you want to call it. So can you fill up that whole yard with it within the setbacks? So can you have an 80 by 80 building? I don't think so. And I think when you're asking for a variance, you have to apply these factors. And I think if you apply these factors honestly, that you will come to the conclusion that this significantly impacts my client. It might be a great benefit for Mr. Jewson. Again, I think there's plenty of other places to park his trailers, not in front of, my client's home. Thank you.
Certainly. Any further questions? Yes, go ahead, John.
So how, okay, I guess a question for you. We had a case like this before the adjustment some years ago.
Yes.
Has that case been reviewed? This case?
Is that the Harris case?
Yes.
Yes, I have reviewed the case.
And so is that a comparable situation as case law now, right? There was a ruling. Does that matter? And if not, then we drop it.
No, that is a very good, a good point to make, council member, mayor, council members and the public. The case that is being referenced is Harris versus City of Wabasha, number A09-1376, decided on June 8th, 2010. In this particular situation, the opinion was unpublished. And so it is limited in how it can be cited as far as precedence is concerned. That being said, unpublished cases do tend to give us an idea of what factors and certain issues, how they would generally be decided if it were to go to a higher court. In this particular case, the issue there is multiple. In that particular case, there was a discussion of the setbacks, of the impervious surface coverage, and the question was about the shape of the parcel and about a twin home if the lot were to be split. The appellants challenged that, who had the adjacent property, specifically based on the fact that their view of the Mississippi River would be obstructed if the planned twin home were to be built. The issues that came up in that one mainly involved, from a legal standard, the Board of Adjustment and then its findings to support their granting of the variance. Basically, appellants made an argument that the Board of Adjustment's initial decision to basically grant the variance without findings somehow tainted the entirety of the process. That is not the case procedurally that we have here. While the fact situation is similar, and in some ways the procedure is similar, the facts of the procedure are not, if that makes sense. It does certainly give us an idea of what the standards are that will be used, which I will discuss when we get to the point of actually making findings, but it does not go into a decision, because it wasn't before then, about whether or not it is whether or not the question of a view shed should be considered in certain decisions like this.
I have a question.
Certainly.
So I guess it's for you, Mr. Davis. So I have a copy of the resolution the Board of Adjustment passed. It's not signed, but I assume it is the correct copy. And in one of the applicable law statements. It says, will granting the variance not alter the essential character of the locality, not be detrimental to the public welfare, not be injurious to other property or improvements to the neighborhood. And then it goes on and it says, the variance not otherwise endanger the public safety and not otherwise substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. And some of the conclusions that it states here that proving is hereby that sorry, but that the variance request is in harmony with the general purposes, will not impair adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, increase congestion, or substantially diminish or impair property value. So I wonder, was that discussed at all or thoroughly at the Board of Adjustment?
Yeah, a lot of these issues were discussed. You know, I don't have any facts that say that this particular proposal will be harmful or injurious to adjacent properties, but there is a really huge issue with this proposal in front of the city council, that it would be just, you know, grievous to adjacent property. I don't have a finding of that. I could not find one. None was presented. So I stand by the findings that I have in my report.
I have no more questions.
Anything further? I'm watching the clock just to be mindful of time. We want to also move on to comments from the recipient or recipients council will be heard by city council. And then of course we'll have an opportunity to follow up with any questions. And then just to foreshadow, we'll have an opportunity for other interested persons not having already spoken or not having already made comment on the record to make comment and an additional follow-up if needed. All right, so we'll hear from Mr. Jewson, and he's the recipient of the variance.
Hello, Jay Houston, 210 North Boulevard East. Recipient. I guess first I think I'll go over some notes I made regarding the previous comments and maybe offer some clarification before I state what I have to state. So the storm drain at Bailey, that has been there for at least 100 years. The end of the storm drain eroded and washed out. But there's 3 or 4 of those along Lawrence that have always been there. So that's what the erosion issue was. It was completely unrelated to, I would say, any of this. But that's what that is. The pool area, to my knowledge, that has been completely removed. I believe it was a vinyl liner that was in there as opposed to like a concrete pool or whatever. It wasn't a real big pool and it wasn't a real deep pool. If there was concrete in there, when we have these big rains, I would have one squishy yard if that was not draining properly. We have a sprinkler system there. There's no, any and all of the pool equipment has been removed. And if you didn't know from Wabasha, you know, whatever, you would have no idea that there had ever been a pool there. There was lots of mention calling this garage a Morton building. I think the intention of that is to degrade what we're building. A Morton building is effectively a pole shed. If I wanted to build a pole shed, I could. Okay, but that's not what I'm looking to build. We're going to build a very nice garage. That's going to use traditional materials, and but that question is really an irrelevant one before us. As far as other large garages, the Miller garage is one that was brought up. That is 30 by 40. It's the exact same as what I'm looking to build. That garage is also like smack on the property line. I'm assuming that they got a variance to build that garage. Although I think they met the impervious surface when they built that, but I'm certain that they would have needed the variance. Farther down the street, my parents have a garage that I think is 38 or 28 by 36. Since they started it, my dad has been kicking himself for not putting another stall on there. It's not big enough. You know, I don't know anybody that has a garage that's big enough, no matter when it's built. The farther down, the old bouquet home, they've got roughly a 1,200 square foot attached garage. That's kind of out of the area, but as far as other large garages in the city of Wabasha, there's plenty. Troy Passy just built one that's got to be close to 30 by 40, about 2 blocks over here, within the last year. As far as renting other space, I do rent some other space. It's not mouse proof. As far as what my trailers are that are gonna look like, I'm building this. I want to be able to have my boat. The other trailer that I mentioned is a little utility trailer that probably just about everybody here probably owns that I would like to keep inside. We've been terrorized by some people at our house. We've had some vandalism. We've had some thefts. Our golf cart was stolen from out in front of our house. And because it wasn't in a garage, you know, so that's covers that, although I think most of that is not relevant. The photos, if you look at those photos, again, one of them, you know, it's got pictures of my dock because that's my yard. All of those pictures are photos of my yard, and I have the right to store things on my yard. I have a right to build a garage on my yard and to use that property as I see fit. They referenced today and in the writings that I should build this garage between the house and the river. Well, that's a great idea, but that's one of the things we've talked about. There's 2,000 square feet there that is city right of way that I couldn't, even if I wanted to. One of the questions as far as, you know, have I made steps to, try something else? Approximately a year ago, my first question was, can we vacate that portion of Lawrence? Because I think practically speaking, the city doesn't need it. If you vacated that portion of Lawrence or improved that roughly 2,000 square feet, I get very close to meeting 40% when you factor in that property. So that was my original request. You know, as far as like the values and things, my lot value, just the lot alone is about 175,000. Mr. Ellis's is about 35,000. You know, there's a reason for that, you know. As far and then the six factors, the question is, will granting the variance do this or do that or whatever? Granting the variance will not do any of that. Okay, parking my boat in the yard will do some of those things. Parking a trailer will do some of those things. Building any garage there will do some of those things. Okay, but granting the variance will do none of those things. It's literally talking about the impervious surface. That's the only reason for the variance. The Harris versus Wabasha, that is like a map of what we've got going on here. It's the exact same thing with the exact same arguments, and it was approved by the Board of Adjustment. It was ultimately confirmed by the council in a situation like this. It was brought to district court, which confirmed the variance, and it was further brought to the appellate court, which also confirmed the variance. And as we know, the property is there today. And if you look at their impervious surface, it's like 55 or 6 or 7%. Also, what they asked for was variances from side yard setbacks, front line setbacks, rear setbacks. That was a ton more things than what I'm asking for here. But impervious surface was one of them, and the main objection was blocking the view, which is what we're dealing with here. Again, the granting the variance for impervious surface will not affect the view. It's irrelevant. Okay, so I guess we go through what I originally planned on. Again, there's only one issue up for discussion. The Board of Adjustment came to a reasonable determination when they granted me a variance to go over the 40% impervious surface. The only item asked for in the variance is approval of the 40%. My building plans meet all other city requirements to obtain a building permit, including but not limited to the size, the height, the placement, the setbacks, the siding, the structure, everything. Again, I'm here to ask that you affirm the board's decision. The Board of Adjustment and city staff have waded through all of the information. Your city planner thoroughly went through all of the questions and recommended to the board that the variance be granted and confirmed that my request met all of the criteria listed to grant the variance. The city council, you have hired city staff and appointed members of the Board of Adjustment to do the heavy lifting on such matters as this. They thoroughly did their due diligence before approving this. The variance was approved and recorded with the county. The plans were then turned over to CMS for approval. CMS approved the plans, and to my knowledge, they've already issued the building permit, which I believe that the city has, but hasn't released it to me because we're here. Mr. Ellis is here to ask that you deny my variance, even though he obtained a variance for the exact same thing. His impervious surface is higher than what I am requesting mine to be. In fact, all of my adjacent neighbors have more than 50% impervious surface. To take it a step further, the average of the properties within 350 feet of my home is 59.5. Only 6 of the 32 properties that I found met the under 40% requirement. Okay, yes, I did include properties that are commercial and such because they're within 350 feet of my house. I'm on the edge of that, you know, and that significantly makes a difference. As you go farther from downtown, the lots get bigger and, you know, there's less impervious surface in both directions. Most all of Lawrence Boulevard heading upriver is well above this. I did lots of calculations. I didn't bring them all. And so I would like to, this is essentially that same sheet that you guys had, but I added a couple other just notes on there, and then a copy of my I'm not sure if you want these passed out or not.
Sure, she can check that, yeah.
And then this is the brief, I guess, for lack of a better word, Harris issue.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, this is the unpublished opinion
Yes.
in Harris. So this is just to clarify for the record.
Okay. And that's everything that I got.
Thank you very much. And we welcome any questions from City Council for the recipient.
Have you considered reducing the size of your garage?
No.
Changing the location?
How high is the garage?
It's gonna be roughly the same as my house, so it'll be like 12 feet. The sidewalls, excuse me, will be about 12 feet, but it'll match the height of one house. Our zoning says that the accessory structure can be no more than 25 feet tall. And I think with the peak of the roof, that it'll be about 19. So
Roof line and roof style and match your house.
that's my intention, yes. Yeah.
Then what kind of materials you want to use for siding and stuff?
Cement board and batten style is my intention.
And I know Craig asked you, to consider a different size or sizing it differently. And you said no, right?
Yes.
Would you consider that?
It fits. It's what I need. It's gotta be that deep to fit my boat in there. We've got other things. My car, I gotta have the tennis ball so that when I pull into my existing garage, I have to stop immediately and I can barely walk around because my car is 20 feet long and that garage is not that big. We have 2 children at home all the time. One of them is gonna be getting a driver's license very soon. She will have a car. I want to have that car in a garage. And I think that's a reasonable thing to want to do. Like I said, we've had thefts in the area, not just at my house, but other places, and security is a big concern.
So I know on planning, there's been discussion, there's been talk about like massing. And you as a realtor probably have some appreciation of massing, sizes of homes and mass of homes in relationship with outbuildings, in relationship to main buildings. Do you think it's a building that size in that close proximity to your house is gonna look good?
I do. I have a big home. I mean, and so it's pretty typical if you have a big house and a big garage. But again, I think that's irrelevant to what we're here.
Anything further for Jay? All right, hearing none. We have a sign-in sheet. I'm not sure who intends to speak, but we certainly, thank you very much, Jay. We certainly can hear from other interested persons again. They signed in to speak. They signed in to speak. Okay, very good. So we'll welcome these folks to the podium. Just in the interest of time, we've thoroughly read the record, which includes comments from the prior Board of Adjustment meetings, but you can certainly speak to any other comments. And we'll just go from the first person who signed in. We have Andrea Gussie at the top of the list, if you're ready. Can't see you from here, sorry.
I live about a block away from the proposed garage, and I've lived there for 53 years, and over those years, we have experienced vandalism ourselves at our house, as well as even cars from Paul Bush's car lot's been stolen during the middle of the night, been found up by the golf course. Unfortunately, I think it's the nature of the beast, and I think it is something to consider. So what we have done, my parents did, is we rented spots to store the boats, the toys that we had, the sporting equipment in other locations that we didn't use all year long. Or you would know, as my dad would say, we take a risk when you leave anything outside. If it's, or wherever you have it outside, your bike can be down at Dick's Supermarket and get stolen and it's still outside. And I just wish, I hope the city council, before making a decision, and I've said this before, will actually go down and actually look at the property and see it and then make the decision. And also to a smaller garage, I think a variance, I think a smaller garage would be more appropriate in the overall fitting of the whole community area, especially when it's a taller building, how they do shadow over other houses around the area and can affect the appearance, the landscaping around those homes. And with the runoff, because I'm now experiencing some issues with runoff on my own property from things that have been there since I was a little kid. And now because they've gotten more mature, I'm having issues of where the water is running off, and I've been having to make adjustments to correct those. So it's not, hey, I'm all for people being able to store stuff, but just to work together and coming to a solution that's going to help down the road too. as well as with the Mississippi River. And like they're saying now, there's that item coming up to talk about how to preserve the river shore and what we need to start doing at some point. So I'm just hoping the city council will take it all into effect. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a formality. We just state your address for the record. We'll ask her to do the same.
Okay, 205 Second Street, East Wabasha, and just out of the information, it used to be the other address. My dad had to get it legally changed to get mail on the other side of the street. Otherwise, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
All right, we have Jane Tim next. I can see Jane.
Oh,
You're good. Okay. Claire had signed in. Claire, do you want to make a comment? You're good.
No, I read the guy I want to say instead.
Okay, thank you. And then Greg Reister. You're good, Greg. And Mr. Grindy was signed in because he was ready to prepare to speak, as well as Mr. Ellis, and then Nancy.
My short, I hope I don't duplicate anything I've said before. I do want to bring up one point. There was a question raised as to value of putting up a shed in that area on the value of Mr. Ellis's house. It wasn't answered at any of the meetings, and I just heard that it wasn't addressed at the meeting. And so I just want to know that it did come up at the second meeting that I attended. I think the proposed actions that fall within the Shoreline ordinance should be in compliance with the ordinance for the well-being of our water. The history of the DNR and the Shoreline ordinance within the city of Wabasha has been an issue of contention several times in the past. I think it's time that the city of Wabasha take the responsibility that they accepted when they accepted to go with the Shoreline ordinance under their jurisdiction. The proposed storage shed, which whatever you think it might be called, to me, it looks like a shed. It does not blend within our river neighborhood, and I would request that you deny the variance.
Thank you. Anyone who did not sign in, wish to make a comment, we welcome that at this time. Tony, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy. Can I state your address for the record? You've written it down here nicely. 212 Second Street East. Sorry about that. Tony, go ahead.
Morning, Johnson, Public Works Director for the City of Wabasha. I just wanted to clarify on two things, not sure if it helps one way or the other, but the storm sewer outlet that we repaired last year, that provides drainage for the storm sewer system all the way up past Paul Bush's Auto Center. So kind of where your alley would come out towards the car lot. So there's a lot of runoff coming from Main Street and everything above the corner of Bailey and Main Street. So the only runoff that would be going down the street would be just from the surface area for one block. And then Mr. Jusen did ask for vacation of the right of way. And so when we took that request, we had to look at what's going to happen in the future for water, sewer, sidewalk, street width. And we did not feel comfortable giving that vacation. So that's why that didn't happen.
Tony, who's we?
Street Commission, yeah. And I got storm sewer maps. I got pictures before and after the repairs of the storm sewer. It's I think it's a 16-inch pipe, which you couldn't see in the picture. So.
Thank you, Tony. Anything further, questions for the city staff? Anything that's come up in your mind that you need clarification on? All right, so we're in the point of the process where I think it probably would be helpful for us to have reiterated the options before us, although I think Jeff summarized them nicely. We have to close the appeal of the public hearing. And so we can do that at this time. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Can I make one more statement?
You may.
In terms of the DNR and the runoff, the staff's findings were that the runoff from this would actually be minimal, is what it was stated as. As far as the DNR and the runoff that we deal with, I think it's primarily from farming, and little tiny things like this are not your runoff issue in the city of Wabasha or the Mississippi River's main issue. But we did discuss that a lot at the Board of Adjustment, and again, that was why the gutters they will go all the way around the structure then all of the water will drain into my own backyard. So, but that's why that was done that way, to make sure that we did minimize whatever we did.
Thank you. And I guess I'll just clarify, there's no additional evidence that we want to have added to the record. We have the documents referenced in both the comments from the appellant as well as the recipient. And so we'll close again, my eyes are getting a little, I think it's 7:45. We'll close the public hearing. Additional questions of city staff on the appeal process and deliberations can be made this time. So do you want to just quickly overview, and then I think everyone is
Absolutely.
on track.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, public. At this point, the City Council is going to be asked to enter into deliberations to make a decision on this issue. As stated before, the city has basically 3 options before it, and I will add a procedural 4th. So the 3 substantive decisions would be to either deny the variance by basically granting the appeal. I want to be careful about how we talk about this. The appeal is asking you to deny the variance. So it would be to grant the appeal and deny the variance, or you could affirm the decision of the Board of Adjustments allowing the additional percentage of impervious surface, or affirm the decision as well as make amended findings and or add additional conditions to it. Further, if there is a reason why there needs to be additional investigation of facts or other things like that, you can also table this for a final decision at your next council meeting. We are well within the decision time frame for hearing and deciding the appeals. So please do not feel like you are rushed in having to make the decision tonight. If there is a need, it can always be put off until next time. So in making those decisions in your deliberations, you'll be asked to basically determine the findings of fact based on the applicable law. As has been stated before and is in the BOA Appeal Council Resolution with Options document you've received, the applicable law is as follows. The Minnesota statute says that variances shall only be permitted when they are in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance, when the variances are consistent with the comprehensive plan, and then the variances may be granted when the applicant for the variances establishes that there are practical difficulties. Practical difficulties means the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the zoning ordinance. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, and the variance if granted will not alter the essential character of the locality. Further, as discussed previously, you should make findings on whether or not the variance will impair adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent property, substantially increase congestion of public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger public safety, or otherwise substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. And then the final finding that we will ask you to make is whether the variance is or is not the minimum variance that would alleviate the practical difficulties. Are there any questions at this point?
Just checking to see again that we still have connection with Dean. I wouldn't want to find out we didn't have him through that.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, unmute it. Okay.
Dean, were you able to hear the overview of the process?
I was.
Okay. So we're at the point for council deliberation. So this is the time for the deliberation next to the decision. So city council can discuss and deliberate on the substantive issues related to the appeal. Does anybody have a point of discussion?
Madam Mayor, just a few things to clarify. So in the list of adjacent properties, when talking about impervious surface, I do want to be clear that there are actually different shoreline overlay districts within this area. So Shoreline 4 and Shoreline 3 are kind of the predominant shoreline districts. One is mostly focused on the downtown core area, and this is somewhat adjacent, being, mostly residential, maybe a few commercial, but the difference between the two is that commercial properties do not have a maximum amount of impervious surface. There are some mixed-use buildings that are required to have 25% maximum surface coverage. And then any residential dwellings, I'm trying to pull up, residential dwellings up to 2 on one property are a maximum of 50%. So I know that there was some discussion about the amount of impervious surface on adjacent properties. I just wanted to be clear that there's a difference in which properties are held to which standard.
So what standard is this property held to,
This is Shoreline Overlay 3.
and what percentage?
It's 40%.
So it has to be 40% or under.
Yeah, that's the ordinance. I think if we needed to, we could probably put together a map, and I could maybe send it to Caroline. We could show it up on there, and there's any further questions and more detailed questions. I just wanted to clarify that.
I think I see a lot of nodding. Did anybody have any clarification needed on that matter?
What's that?
Anybody have any clarification need on that matter?
No, I'm well aware of it being a BOA before,
Thanks for the
so.
offer. Dean, any clarification needed on that matter? Harry was willing to illustrate.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Any further?
Most of these residential properties listed on the sheet, are they in the same overlay district?
They are, most of them.
So
Any other points of deliberation?
I do have a question. It might be a weird one, but I know I talked to Mr. Davis, but what constitutes the front of a house? Is it the address?
Yeah, so, Madam Mayor.
Certainly.
In this particular situation, yes, and what we've historically used across Wabasha is wherever the address is, we consider the front of the house. I can think of a lot of situations where, maybe the front of the house is just for show, and so maybe they have a door that's probably more actively used, either on the side, or maybe everyone just comes into the garage. I think either way, we've always defaulted to addresses being the front, as that's just a very clear way of showing that and defining that. I think that there are probably some rare situations where that doesn't always work, but those, I would argue, are few and far between and unique situations for them. So.
Okay.
So if we don't follow the impervious surface guidance, why is it there?
Right, well, so I'm trying to figure out how to not get philosophical. I guess,
Sorry.
yeah, no.
How about the fact that it's 5 to 8? That'll help.
Right. Although I don't mind talking about philosophy
Right.
on occasion, but I think where the DNR and the idea behind shoreline overlay at the very beginning was to deter a lot of pollutants that ended up in public waters, and public waters being one of the main things that Minnesotans enjoy. Between the Mississippi River and the 10,000 lakes that we have and St. Croix, there are a lot of reasons as to why public waters should be protected. And so preventing or limiting the impact of adjacent properties to those bodies of water, the state saw fit to enact some statutes for it, and then the DNR sort of carried through on a lot of that, a lot of the statutes and a lot of the policy. It's to protect those public waters in various different ways. So impervious surface being one of the ways that you can limit the amount of runoff, and runoff sometimes carries a lot of things that are toxic to the things that we enjoy about our water bodies. You want to swim, but you don't want to swim in something that smells a little weird or feels a little weird when you get out of it. sometimes you might want to fish in those public bodies and you don't want to pick up a 3-eyed fish. There are, sometimes runoff deals with that and therefore impervious surface. I think the other part of it is limiting. And when you look at a lot of the shoreline ordinances, they very severely restrict the amount of permitted uses that you can do just by right along the Mississippi River, along lakes, along streams. And that's to limit any sort of potential negative impact of, some sort of, industrial or sort of warehouse, so maybe even like a car mechanic sort of use that has a lot of pollutants that are spilled on the ground and sometimes we get carried off in a rainstorm of some sort. So that is the reason why we have it. It is something that even the DNR and trainings that I've been a part of between, just to either brush up or to learn more about different things that the DNR does. The DNR doesn't always, how do I put it? When you are granting a variance, there has to be, as the opponent's attorney argued, there has to be a very good cause for it. You can't just be granting variances left and right. I definitely believe in that. I think that in the situation of a variance, there's also context that has to be considered. Looking at adjacent properties, not just from the impact of would it be injurious to others, but is it anything that other people also enjoy on those adjacent properties? I think the DNR sees a lot of that as pretty valuable as well. When you're already in a situation where everyone else around you has impervious surface, then you kind of get singled out as the only person that doesn't or can't do the same things that your neighbor enjoys. That seems problematic. But generally, to answer your question, the DNR is there however they can to guide cities towards making decisions that are going to be the least impactful upon water bodies, public waters.
Councilmember, may I add to that momentarily? These are, as Mr. Davies has noted, these are things that are set originally by the DNR in their rulemaking process, in which each of their rulemaking processes, there's something called a statement of reasonableness for the proposed revisions. And so in that document, they go through the reasons why each of these are put into place. And they do address that there is, when they talk about making exceptions to zoning rules and others, that there is a need for implementation flexibility in it. And that is what is stated in the document, which I can certainly add to the record.
I know we've dealt with this.
Well, I find it interesting that the DNR didn't come hard down on this, because I can tell you, working on the Board of Adjustments or planning, they're not shy of saying no, by any means. So it's kind of interesting that they didn't say, hey, no, we don't really approve of this. It's just kind of like, well, we recommend you to ban, which is interesting, I think, but that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, I think, we should try and accommodate the DNR when we can. I think that water quality is important. And I think that this issue of impervious surface in here is not, is an issue, but to me, it's not the main issue. To me, the main issue is that the nearby property value is going to be diminished. And so that's one of the findings that you have to find is will it diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood or fit within the context of the neighborhood. So you can argue a 40 by 30 garage is going to fit within the neighborhood. There are other larger garages, as Mr. Houston has specified, but those are mostly out of sight. This will be in plain sight. This will also be where all the tour buses are going to go when they come to the Eagle Center. They're going to go down Bailey Street. So it's going to be, it's not just on a side street, it's going to be something that's going to be definitely visible. So I think that that has a factor, but also mainly I think the factor is it's diminishing the neighbor's property, not only Mr. Ellis, but it could others, who knows? Mr. Ellis his site on the Mississippi River is going to be blocked. He could park a boat there if he doesn't build that garage, but the boat will probably be gone in the summertime. So that's, if the garage is built as it's proposed, it's going to block that on a permanent basis. So I would hope that we could come to some type of agreement where perhaps the garage could be relocated on the lot. Perhaps the garage size could be diminished. 30 by 40 is a large garage. So that's how I kind of feel on it.
Any of the deliberation points of note or questions?
Just a comment that if you have to buy a house on Main Street, are you expected to have a water, is that considered waterfront property now for property value? Because to me, it's not. I mean, it's like he said, it's buyer beware, you know. You're not, you don't own a waterfront view if you're not on the waterfront. You know, your neighbors have every right to, you know, if they block it, it's, you know, if it's within the rules. I don't buy the argument that it's really going to decrease property values.
Well, I think he's got buyers that backed out that were going to, when they found out about the garage. So
But like I said, it's, if you want to view, you buy a riverfront property.
it's going to diminish the view that's there now.
So would a tree. You know what I mean? I mean, shrubs.
Trees can be cut down.
But
Shrubs can be trimmed.
You know what I mean? And I haven't experienced this personally, right? I mean, I enjoyed river views for 15 years. You know, they're gone. You know, I don't own that property. They develop it as they chose. I had an opportunity possibly to buy that property and I didn't. So that's kind of where that's at, right? And I appreciate Mr. Ellis's position on that. But it is, I mean, it is, when you buy a piece of property, you don't buy those shed views, you don't buy those views. It's not a reserved, piece.
Well, I think they are part of the value of the property. You know, they could be changed. This is going to change that value. It's there now, the value, the view. So the value is up. If it's not there, the value will go down. And so that's just a fact. And I think we just have to accept that fact. So that's why I would look to see if there's any type of way we can find the middle ground. Sure.
I mean, I do have a concern about the size of this thing. I don't really understand the justification for a 30 by 40. I mean, I couldn't do 30 by 30 with an extra 10-foot back that would preserve part of the view or something like that. But
Does anyone feel like they've had substantive enough discussion to make a recommendation for action, or as council pointed out, action with conditions, or a desire for further evidence, which would require that we table the discussion and obtain that?
I just have a couple more questions. So this application, it meets its setbacks, right?
Correct.
It doesn't encroach on backyard or side yard setbacks or anything. So he could set it back farther in his yard with a variance. Does he have plenty of room back there? I don't even know.
I think we lose the front of the building back.
Yeah, and.
Please, yes, please
Yeah.
clarify, yeah.
So in terms of moving that structure back, I know that it's not exactly a simple thing to do, and it still extends the amount of driveway surface at that point. So it's like, okay, well, you know, Robbie viewed it as a haul away. I think there's a lot to consider with the particular location, just because there is some topography of that which I don't know a whole lot about in terms of what that would change for the cost of the structure, even though the economic part of this is not to be considered. I just don't know what that is. And I think at that point, I'd rather defer to Mr. Jewson as to how feasible that is.
Can I ask what's behind that fence and that low brick wall where the pool used to be?
Yes, that's our backyard. It's a fenced in area. We're gonna put a hot tub back there, and that's where our dogs, go to the bathroom, and it's the rear yard of our property. If I made a smaller garage and applied for a building permit tomorrow, it would be granted. So the argument about the view is not an argument to make. I'm going to build a garage in that location.
You would still probably need a variance because you'd be over the 40%. Even the
I can
size,
replace my driveway.
you can do
I
a
can
20,
make it.
well, you
I
can
can
pave
make
it.
20 by 40. But again, so if I, let's say I move the whole thing back, well, now you're actually gonna increase the impervious surface. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So in having it be the minimum reduces the amount of impervious surface. As far as the value goes, if I would have been involved in the sale for Mr. Ellis, or let's say Heidi and Tony Purvis live. That house has been there for 100 years. There was not a home in front of it. They would have had an amazing view. Dave and Eileen Glasspool built a house there. All you see from their backyard is a roof. That's just the way that it is. And so if I would have been selling and somebody would have said, hey, I've got this river view, am I going to have this river view forever? I would say, don't count on it. They can put whatever they want. Those pictures are photographs of my yard. That's my dock, because that's my yard. That's where I can put stuff, and so I should be able to use that. And that's what I'm intending on doing.
I can't remember who asked the question.
May I make a comment on that, since we're allowing these comments?
Well, that was a response to a direct question. I think we should keep it
You're
to,
allowing one person to answer a direct question?
that was a question posed by council in deliberation. Is it related to that question?
Related to what he said.
Okay, if it's related to that question, certainly. I just want to reintroduce, general comment, I guess is the point.
With regard to the size of the garage, of course, he could make this garage smaller if he wanted to make this garage smaller. And if he made this garage small enough, then yes, he may be at that 40%. So guess what? We wouldn't be here for a variance. As far as being a terrible neighbor, if you wanted to make that garage smaller and put it all the way up in front, yes, Mr. Jewson could do that. Just like Mr. Jewson never contacted my client about what he was going to do. As far as there being a more impervious driveway, there are, and I'm sure Mr. Davis could testify to this, there are things that can be used for driveways that allow water to percolate through those driveways. Mr. Jewson could use that so that it wouldn't be deemed an impervious surface. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other comment or clarification? Go ahead.
Mayor, council members, I want to remind you of the statutory provision involving conditions on a variance that states that a condition must be directly related to and must bear a rough proportionality to the impact created by the variance. Thank you.
So again, we have the opportunity to grant the variance to affirm or modify. Excuse me, we can, sorry, I'm missing the word. We can affirm it or we can.
You can affirm or you can overrule.
Overrule it, thank you. We can overrule or we can affirm it with conditions. And as you stated, have to be related and measured. Yes.
So do we work through the conditions before we make a motion to?
You can certainly deliberate that.
Yeah, Mayor, council members, there are two ways to do this. One of them is if there is just roughly speaking, if there is a interest in a majority of the voting members of the council to add certain conditions and to amend the findings, that can certainly be discussed. If there is a concern that there, regardless of those conditions, that there might be a need to have an up or down vote on, are we going to move forward with something or are we not? That vote could be taken first and then the findings could follow later.
And it's drafted for us as such. So if you want to return to the resolution language to kind of see what those details would need to look like, or what the resolution language would look like, and then how we would amend it with any conditions that's in the agenda packet.
Well, just to move things along, I'd like to make a motion that we deny the variance based on the fact that it's going to be injurious to the neighbors and other properties in the neighborhood.
Okay, we have a motion to overrule the Board of Adjustments decision. Do we have a second? Okay, motion falls short of a second. Do we have any other motion to be made?
I'll make a motion to accept or
From
affirm
the Board of Adjustment.
Board of Adjustments decisions. And I would go so far as to apply the findings of facts.
Okay.
Can I do that?
You can. I would suggest that are you asking to apply the same findings of facts that were in the Board of
Yes.
Adjustments? You can do that if you believe that each of them is adequate and is connected to a reasonably justified determination.
So can I ask a question? So the recommended conditions of 1, 2, and 3 that are in our packet. So the one is about period of longer than 6 months, which I think is in the BOA,
Yeah, that's
right? And then the
Yeah.
gutter one is in the BOA. What about number 3? The proposal shall meet all the requirements of zoning. That wasn't in the BOA one, right?
Oh, sorry.
It's not, but it's a standard condition that is.
Well, we always argue this at planning, it's
Yes.
a standard, but should we add it just for? I don't care either way, to tell you the truth, but, because it is a standard.
As your counsel, I would advise you to add it.
Okay, so I'll amend my motion to add the number 3.
Which
Right.
reads, when acting as an appeals board, the city council reviews the decision.
No, it's the proposal shall meet all the requirements.
I
of the
see,
zoning
yes.
ordinance.
Yes, got it. Okay. All right, so with that revised motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second from Tim. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think that, when looking at the original resolution, it does say that this action will granting the variance will not alter the essential character and will not diminish or impair property values. And I think that's a fact that it's going to do that. So I think you should consider that when you vote.
Any further discussion? I think we'll call a roll vote because we have Councilmember Moyer online. All right, any further discussion before we call a roll vote? Who's prepared to call for us, Tyler? All right. Go ahead, Tyler.
What is the motion?
The motion? Yeah, go
Is
ahead.
to affirm
The variance.
with to affirm the variance, grant the variance, with the findings of fact, the conditions that the BOA it was in their initial findings, and as well as the additional finding of that it will meet all other zoning standards and ordinances.
Clear on the motion, everybody good? All right, we'll have a roll vote.
Sella,
Yes.
Freemeyer,
Yes.
Moyer,
yes,
Feldman,
No.
Waller,
Yes,
All right, and I'm abstained, so motion prevails. Okay. All right, so we have an action and majority vote. And we have no conditions to add as amendments. Just third item, clarifying that third item is included. All right,
So there will be findings of fact to review. Do you want to have me put it together now and then approve the resolution tonight, or do you want to do that part in 2 weeks?
we should probably do it.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I would just do it at the next meeting. but
Probably do it the next meeting, so we can really read it.
It's easier,
Got it.
Yeah, great.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so that's our action, and, I'm sorry, I was so concerned about giving ample time to the hearing that I do want to make an announcement. I didn't make my mayor's message at the top of the hour, because I wanted to make sure that I made an announcement, and then we'll accept the donations. And, motion to adjourn. But very clearly for our upcoming U.S. Army Corps of Engineers meeting, public meeting on April 13th, which was held at the high school. There may be some misunderstanding about the purpose of that meeting and what it will and will not include. It will be a review of the dredge material management plan, and public comment is requested. The city's main issue there will be explaining and participating in the discussion of the 217D agreement. It is not a comment period for the barge terminal facility. That will be a separate public process. I just want to make that clear. We really want public participation at that meeting, but we want to have people to have clarity on what that involves. And so we'll return to our agenda. I do want to very much thank.
I'm sorry, thank you for
Certainly.
allowing me to appear. Could I just ask council when the official notice is going to be given that starts the clock ticking? Because there was some misunderstanding after this last one and where we go actually. And because normally I thought you'd automatically go to district court, but if you could shed some light on that.
Well.
It's a joint answer.
Sorry.
I was going to say it's a joint answer here, and so to clarify, are you asking as far as the actual order?
When starts the clock ticking, you go to district court.
That will be in 4 weeks when the resolution is passed.
Is there any way that can be done tonight? I mean, this has been going on since the 1st of January.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, please.
So I just want to interject really quickly, and perhaps council can sort of help from there. So the deadline for action has been extended to May 3rd.
Okay.
Calendar has city council on May 3rd. Is there an issue?
That will be the final action on it in cases where there is a appeal process. As the city has made the first decision was made by the Board of Adjustments. Then it went to an appeal process that starts the clock over again, which I know is unfortunate for people who are waiting to get building permits and other things. That being said, in order to make sure that the resolution, the findings in the resolution are properly prepared in such a manner, given that the posture of the appellate is that this will likely be going to a further district court appeal, I would highly recommend there be a time to make sure those are in order.
Understood, thank you.
Very good. All right. So I recognize some people might want to depart, and that's perfectly fine. I just want to be clear. We'll go back to that review of the audit. We'll return to our general business. And I totally missed our administrator's report too. I was just flustered by that technology snap because I was actually looking forward to the audit review. So we will do that. That administrator report. Anybody who wishes to stay certainly may. And if you need to depart, we thank you for your presence tonight. So Caroline, please give us the administrative report, and I'll certainly check in with other committees as well.
Okay, yeah.
Zoom makes me nervous because I have 10 years of experience where it works and doesn't work, and a lot's on the line. So I appreciate our ability to go back.
I think, it was in the packet, so it just seems also minor at this point. It's happy 1-year anniversary to me.
Yes,
That's where
indeed.
it started.
Happy anniversary indeed.
So I just said, hard to believe it's been a year. The time has flown by. It was initially, it still is a steep learning curve. And I think we're all getting in a great routine of working together. So key dates, there's a waterside chat this Thursday at the VFW to provide input on water resources. And there's also a survey. Tony Johnson is going to be attending, and so is Pat Mueller. And I encourage other people to attend. I think Jeff is going to attend as well. And that's going to be discussing runoff issues and the quality of the water.
Yes, yeah. And the survey is very easy if you're not able to attend.
Yep. And then April 13th is that dredge material management.
And what
plan.
time is that?
7 p.m.
Very good.
The
at the high
DNM.
school.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'll just go through some highlights. I think the big highlight is we did get a congressional earmark or a congressional directed request towards the Eagle Center. And it was for $138,434. So we've heard a lot of feedback from the public that they wanted to put that permanent dock back in place. So we asked Brian Mull, could our $138,000 go towards a bigger dock facility to bring in the steamboats? And there's, issues with permitting, but that's going to be probably more or less $700,000 to $800,000 extra expense. So what we're in talking to Brian Mull, proposing is some additional lighting over the plaza, some cable lighting, and potentially cover over the stage. And so we're looking at, because right now it's totally unshaded, that amphitheater area. So if there's comments or ideas, you can share those with me by email. And so that is basically, I think we debated if that issue should come before council. And so let me know if that's something you want to discuss. And we received a $33,000 grant from the DNR for trees that Tony Johnson wrote that grant. And so it's going to be official soon, but that's really good news for our urban forestry initiatives. And I think the rest of it, you could just read in the notes, so.
Yeah, I was so happy to hear some of this stuff. This is a lot of effort on a lot of people's parts, and in many cases, repeat effort to receive some of these funding applications and see them come to the light of day. So I didn't want to mention any of it in my message and steal the thunder of staff, who's largely responsible for that. But as Caroline mentioned, input is always welcome. We've had a lot of citizen input on trees, so when this is publicly formally announced, I think it'll be met with a lot of enthusiasm. All right, and then any commissioner reports. I guess you guys had utilities today.
We had 2 utilities meetings. One was yesterday. Just quickly, the item of note happened at our last meeting. Every year we review sewer and water fees. And at the advice of our financial guys, they look at our accounts, they do projections to the future. We voted for a 2% increase on water rates and 0 on sewer rates. I think the plan in the future, as it stands right now, is we'll probably expect to see a 2% increase per year, just to keep up with repairs and things for the future and projects. One other note I wanted to make, earlier this year, no, it was last year, I was appointed the commander of the Sons of the American Legion. So I've taken that over. And Paul Fleechek asked that we be in charge of fireworks donations this year. So we'll be doing that for Paul, and thank Paul for doing that for a number of years. So I put a notice on Facebook, which I'll post each month until the 4th of July. I sent 60+ letters out to businesses, and then we have our normal donors. And so our donation from the city will likely, I think we already budgeted for that, didn't we? So we don't need to do it again. So thank you for your donation. And yeah, and anybody else that wants to donate, you can contact me, and thank you.
Good. All right. And Port Authority,
Did not meet.
That's right. Okay, that's right. There was a substantive update. Right?
Yeah,
Anything
we
from
had
the update?
CETA's staffing, and it was determined we're making another change, so we're back with Kathy right now, and that's wonderful. She's exhausted. She's got so much going on. And then the Port Authority meeting for this month is on the 26th, not the 19th. So
Yeah,
we push it out a week.
Okay. And out of Port Authority has come this local housing
Yes.
committee, which will meet for the first time officially tomorrow. There was an initial meeting with the Minnesota Housing Institute staff, which I was able to participate in. So we look for a lot of stakeholder input, and that's being chaired by Robin Gwaltney from the Port Authority. And let's see, Planning Commission.
So we just briefly talked about a amendment to the Eagles Basin PUD to allow for kind of a cluster housing, a cozy home community type of thing. It's really kind of 6 to 8 houses kind of in a group with shared kind of common space, which if you remember, Eagles Basin was partly designed like that in essence. So that will be forthcoming this month or not?
Well, there's been, so there's been a little bit of change to
Okay.
that. They,
Well, I don't need to know. It may come this month or it may come next
They'll
month.
read their packets.
Yes, so that's what, our next meeting is the 12th, if we have a.
And then streets or parks, Tony, there's great news all around, it seems like, which is good
I
to share.
don't really have anything big to crack Dylan folks. It's kind of an extension from last year. I guess the big thing I want to do is recognize Dylan. Harder to put in his notice, you know, he's moving to bigger and better things. So 10 years, very good worker, very knowledgeable when he got here, jack of all trades. So we're gonna get some applications and see how we can refill this position either within or from outside and kind of go from there. But make it tonight to have football meetings and stuff like that. So I just wanted to.
We definitely appreciate his service.
Yeah.
I'm on the street commission, and I would just like to comment that we review every penny that's spent. And I think our street commission has done a really good job on staff of maintaining the budget and things. But I believe there were some cuts a couple of years ago that are really going to impact that in the future. And I would just like consideration as we have budget talks and things that making sure that those numbers go back up, you know, so we can continue to protect the infrastructure and things like that. So,
Well, we love to hear comment from streets commissioners or the public when we start looking at budget. That's for sure.
So Caroline, weren't you guys gonna meet for CIP planning? And wasn't Tony a part of that, or did I miss something?
For,
Maybe that was a joke.
if we're running,
For like, capital improvement planning and.
yeah, I mean, we're looking at a new software. Is that what you're remembering? So, okay.
I missed the meeting that you guys had done some of those cuts, and I didn't realize that was gonna happen. So I've tried to remember that since then, and just try to encourage council to be very cautious about those types of cuts and things, because it's important. So, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
And yes,
I would just like to say thank you for the city council for at least letting, come back to normal meetings again,
Yeah.
and to listening and taking into consideration both the black and white, but also looking at the overall picture. Because growing up in Wabasha, that was one of the key factors. It's everybody work together as a team of looking out for your neighbors and just kind of doing what's best since we have a river town.
yep, it's good to have the public back. We appreciate being in
And
person.
thank you guys for all your service, for all the service, for all the different departments. I know you guys, it's not easy being on the board.
Darren, did you have any further updates for us?
No, it's fire, of course, it's severe weather awareness tomorrow
Okay, yeah.
or Thursday. So I guess 1:30 and 6:30 sirens for that. We'll get something out on Facebook here tomorrow, but yeah, that's all we really got going on right now, so.
Okay,
Standard.
good. And any other comment from commissioners? I know Jeff's on planning, and Craig, if you have anything else to share from the board. All right, very good. And
Are we meeting tomorrow?
the
Not the board, but it's are we meeting with the court tomorrow at 10 o'clock?
core, yeah, just a planning meeting for the logistics on the 13th, yes. And then we do have to, go back and make sure we hit this item that moved out of the consent agenda. So that's the ambulance position. I'll let Caroline talk about that a little bit.
Should be 10.
Sorry?
10-2.
Oh, 10-2, thank you.
10-2.
10-2, thank you. I'm telling you guys, 10.2 is at administrative review process. I think I've overlooked this because it's just really an update, but I do want people to understand what's coming. This is probably familiar. We're following the same kind of path that we had in the past where we're looking for departmental feedback, but with our employment attorneys kind of advice on this. They recommended a survey format because people are really free, anonymous environment in which to make comment. Obviously, being asked questions about your direct report, you want to be able to give feedback and not have them come and talk to you about it that afternoon. So we will be doing that through a Survey Monkey or like, as well as a survey specifically designed for council. These are the surveys that were in place that the city has used in the past. So we're just implementing them electronically. The goal is to have this process conducted through the month of May so that we'd be able to have that process of the review in May. We'll kind of see how the agenda shapes up. I don't want Caroline to have her review as a part of a very long and exhausting meeting, nor for people to feel that they don't have the time and energy to make comment. I think reviews are very important. We have an important member of staff who's new in the role and has had a lot of goals and wants to be able to speak to her progression on those. But just know that survey will be coming. We'll probably send out the survey, and then I think we'll have to send out something that makes people aware that the survey went out because it was going to my junk mail and we're testing it. So we're just working through some of the kinks, but that'll be the process that's planned. And then we'll have procedural, advice from council about how we do that closed portion related to, employee evaluation. So that will be forthcoming. And now 10.3, which is the ambulance position and a recommendation on that.
Okay.
Rate. That was up in consent
two.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know. I think so. This recommendation is that we move the ambulance director from a grade 14 to a grade 18, and I kind of put the numbers in the recommendation, but currently we're at a range of 48,000 to 59,000 per year for this position. And then I propose 57 to 69, which is a grade 18. And then we've only had one applicant for the position, and it's been advertised over a month. And in speaking with our labor attorney, best practices to have definitely more than one applicant for this level position and significance. In reaching out to a few individuals who had previously expressed interest, I heard from a few people that salary was a reason they did not apply. And in thinking about it, we have not been paying for a director for a while, so that gives some flexibility for this year. But we are incurring overtime because we don't have hours filled. But and so I looked at what other populations similar in size pay, and Lewiston is paying about 64,000 with a salary study underway to provide a wider range and potential for increase. Preston, Minnesota, population 1,400, 58 to 81,000. St. Charles 3728. Caledonia 60 to 76. They just advertised, and even with that range, 60 to 76, really only ended up with 2 qualified applicants. So it is just generally a hard position to market. And then Caledonia was 60 to 75,000, and Lake City, it was for assistant director 68,973, but they're definitely kind of larger and a larger service. So I did receive some feedback. I don't know, Darren, if you want to speak to that feedback, to consider even a 19 or 20, so we can get in the low 70 range. It's also important to think about internal considerations and where everyone's at, because I think it's been an issue with the way the market is. We don't want to, offer a brand new person. We got to think of where everyone else is currently at. So I feel that 18 is solid, but I think Darren had some good points that he'd like to share. And the other option that Mayor Duran and I discussed, knowing that this is going to be tiring, is just to appoint 3 members to just discuss this along with other kind of issues that are emerging around wages and things. So I don't know, Darren?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to get up here and say anything tonight, but.
Oh, you don't have to. I think you said it. What I wanted Caroline to feel comfortable with is this process, you know, is complex. And we're feeling in the private sector too, there's an equity issue, there's a competitive market issue. You know, I think we see it. I don't
Yeah,
think
there's a lot of
we're
things out there that, come into play when it comes around to doing a survey of population and run volume and stuff. When it comes to like Lewiston and Yoda or Preston or whatever the other ones are at, Wabasha is kind of different in a way because it's got St. Elizabeth's Hospital here, or Gunderson or whatever it is. Running 911 calls for volunteers is something that you can get volunteers to do. If I knew Wabasha was just running 911 calls, I would probably take call 5 days a week. Because I know I could go on call for an hour and a half, and I would be back home. Right now, you can get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, get a transfer to Gunderson or Rochester, and you're not getting home for 3 or 4 hours. That's what's deflecting people to come to Wabasha to be an EMT, is the chance that they're gonna be called out 2 or 3 times a night, and you got regular jobs to get up for in the morning. And these other cities that I've seen on here don't have a hospital facility that is as big as St. Elizabeth's. So there's tons of factors to look into, and when I was rector 10 years ago, volunteers were more abundant. They were willing to do some of this stuff. Volunteerism's gone way down, we all know it in everything we do. And it's even harder to get somebody to come out and want to do 4 or 5 hours a night of being on the road, whether you're going to the cities, whether you're going to the, Eau Claire at 3 in the morning in a snowstorm, it doesn't matter. I think that's what's preventing people from applying. We've had some directors in here in the past, just the last 4 or 5, and they come in a short period of time, they're burned out. The reality of it is you have to pay somebody to come in here to deal with the situations they got to deal with. And coming in here for $50,000-$60,000 a year and deal with the 60 hours a call, deal with getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and making sure that they have backup when they do go on a transfer. There's just a lot. It's not just I can go there for 5 days a week and go home. You just don't have that option in this position. And so it's not different than, the police department, whatever. It doesn't have it. You call an ambulance, you need to have an ambulance. And we need to make sure that we have somebody in that position that is going to work on recruitment and be available for calls 24/7. I mean, you got to be able to answer your phone. You got to be able to answer certain, there's so much at stake for this. And I think you're offering a wage that I can go down to Hy-Vee and work and come home from a 40-hour work week and not have to worry about the headache. So I think realistically, for the citizens of Wabasha, this ambulance service is so important. It's right now, I feel like it's on the bottom of the scale of things to look at in Wabasha for investing into or anything. It's not being a priority, which the people of Wabasha deserve to have a good ambulance service. And I think by boosting up and getting a better group of people to come in here with a higher salary or higher expense, you're going to get a better group of people, and you're going to get more dedicated people. And they're going to come in here and say, I'm making good money. I got to be home this weekend, or I got to be on call every 3rd weekend, or we all know how this works, And so do I believe that this is even 18 high enough? No, I don't believe so. I don't believe you have to shoot it up to a 22, but I believe that you started out, you can start out at 19 or at 20 and start out at the bottom of that scale. It gives them an opportunity to say, hey, if you go through step 10, you're going to make this kind of money. If you start them out at 18, you're going to max out at a certain amount, and they're looking at that maxed amount, and I'm going to be under $70,000. And I got to deal with all this stuff. I got to deal with 4 full-time members. I got to deal with the hospital. I got to deal with interfacility transfers, billing. There's just a lot of things to go. Tim, No, John, It's just, I just think we've always been low. We've always accepted thinking that this person goes down there and they sit in their office and they do this. Well, it's not that. They got to be ready to respond to the emergencies that we deal with in this town. And some of them are pretty bad. So I think we need to just, I hope that the council looks at that a little closer. We can boost this up, get a better group of clients in there, and maybe get a little bit more dedication to a director's position. Maybe not, but that's just my input on it. I said I wasn't, I don't want to get up here.
I mean, yeah, I thought it was worth sharing because Darren's been ambulance director before, so he's knowledgeable.
I deal with it with my wife. I deal with, just the time that she's gone, the time that, we're home on the weekends, it is what it is, and I won't take that
And
back,
he has
but-
agreed to write a newspaper column on this.
All right.
And I think that's needed, that we need to share with the community, and he can do it very eloquently, the importance of our ambulance service. So
Thank you.
guest columnist, Darren Shealy, coming soon
I
with,
got enough stuff to do.
I'll be the ghost editor on it, so.
This is a good setup. The options before us would be to just let Caroline and work with staff to talk further on this and recommend something else. I think Caroline was seeking in advance of this meeting, some ability to discuss this again with some kind of a group that will liaise to council. If anyone is willing to do that, we can certainly have the broader discussion amongst council, but in my experience, short-lived is it maybe when we've had a group that'll sit down, have a meeting, think it through, liaise with council, present the kind of the summary. I think that sets council up for more good discussion. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts, or if you want to make a direct request.
Well, I think that the options could be deciding something today, so we can go ahead and advertise tomorrow with the new scale. Or it could be appointing a committee, but then offering this range for that committee to make a decision and move forward. So yeah, I wouldn't want to bring it back to council, because one concern that Darren didn't mention is we're coming up on summer now soon, with a lot of our volunteers wanting to, not able to take as many weekend call hours. And if we can't, fill a fourth position with those call hours, there's just some concern that already, I think, we're seeing a little more overtime because the volunteers aren't picking up as many of those shifts. So,
well, before we hotly debate the two options presented, we do need to check whether a group would have that authority, or whether they would only have the authority to discuss it and come forth and make a recommendation that council acts on.
So I would like to act on this today.
I would
Go
too.
for it.
I'll actually make a
The
motion.
three alarming things that I want to point out to the council is Lewiston is at 64,000. That right now is not even our top. That's over our top.
Right.
And Preston is at 81 for a top, and that isn't even close to our top on 18. And the other alarming thing is our chiefs, our directors, all are in the 20s and 21s. Not that they don't deserve it, but now all of a sudden cheaping out the ambulance at 18. Makes zero sense to me. I mean, if you listen to any argument with running an ambulance service, it's $500,000, and our budget is not $500,000. So, I mean, I would propose to get it up to grade 19, find a qualified candidate, and go from there. If we want to reassess it after that, I'm fine with it.
See, and I would argue that we should go grade 20,
Well,
because then we can start lower, but it gives it that
I agree with
blue
John.
sky a little bit. There's anticipation, I can find best time to write.
I mean, if you go to 20, that still is equivalent to our assistant police chief. So, I mean, that isn't even up to our chief yet, so which is this person's dedicated just as much as that. So, I'm all for it. 19, 20, I mean, if you want to go to 22, I'm fine with that too. But
Yeah.
I would recommend that we at least look at 19 or 20.
and I just want to add, because this is a sensitive topic for all employees here, because we do have somebody, is what I would say is we act here, but then I do want to recommend and get a small committee to look at just an overall wage and class study to make sure that with these changes, it's equitable amongst all employees, and get a third-party consultant that's not me, because this is a really good way to make people mad.
Well, I would agree, but maybe
yeah.
does it all the time. We reassess jobs every 2
Okay,
years. at
yeah,
some
so I
point.
want to
So-
reassess everybody in the near future, but this is urgent just because of the summer and having the position on the
I'll make a
bill.
motion
Yeah.
to move it to grade 20.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I really don't have a feel for it, so it's hard to vote on this.
Yeah.
I agree that the ambulance.
What's that?
director should go up.
62 to 76.
I agree that the ambulance director salary should be increased. But right now, so you affect everybody that's in those lines. And I think Carolyn made a good point. It's probably best to give this a little bit of thought instead of just doing this for the moment at a meeting.
Well,
You gotta get a director there, that's the thing, you can't go into July and think that you're gonna have an ambulance there to call, because the reality of it is that we're coming into a shortfall, and there's not gonna be staff there, you ain't gonna have a director yet. Even if you go through the hiring process, it's gonna take a month or two to get that process through.
I think it's
The
pressing.
reality of it is-
I agree that that's gonna take a while, but Caroline, for what you were talking about, when do you think you could come back with a recommendation as to what grade to put this at?
Well, we have a motion for one now.
Yeah,
And
I'm
we have a motion,
comfortable
we
with
don't have a
anything.
recommendation.
I mean, I thought 18 was the minimum, but as I look at the other ranges, you know, I think it's definitely, I'm comfortable with it.
We had the task force that, and there was 3 of us on the council that was on that and staff as well. And there was a lot of review and study and education about what that position does. And we've known it's been kind of behind the 8 ball for a while already. And then you look, I mean, the analysis is right before you. Preston St. Charles, Caledonia, and I'd throw Lake City out probably.
yeah, I would.
We need to compete in this market if we intend to continue to sustain our service. And I think that's the bottom line. And we've all sat in that chair, so most of us have, so, you know, it's kind of.
Tyler, can you just ballpark me on what that's gonna increase the budget just for this year? What is it, like 10,000 or? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
With some,
Well, it's tough because we haven't had anyone on the position, so no one's been taking benefits or the salary.
Yeah.
So I think Tyler and I did the calculation on 18 and felt like we'd be okay. And we don't know what the final is, so, you know, if we start somebody at the lowest and even on a 2062, you know, it just kind of, it's gonna depend. I've never really, usually a new employee wouldn't be starting on the top, and they'd be on a 1 through 4
Well,
typically,
but
or.
you're not gonna find a brand new employee for this position.
No.
This
Yeah.
person's gonna probably have experience, and so you're gonna start them on the top end or higher end anyway.
Yeah, there's time for analysis and then there's time to just do it.
I totally agree with the analysis, and that should be done every 2 or 3 years
Right.
anyways.
and that's kind of a separate issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm more than happy to help out if they want.
Sometimes talking to things to death is just,
No,
it's
Yeah.
time to just
So
act
call the
and.
question.
Yeah, we've got a motion on the floor. You want to call the question?
Just get the advertise of the new position and then.
At a grade 20, and then,
That's the motion, yeah.
Maybe some guy will give a big surprise and gets an analysis and come back with a higher wage.
Gonna increase the budget for this year, but it's not a stranglehold, so.
So we have a motion, we have the second, we've had a lot of discussion, any further discussion? We'll call for a roll vote, because we've got Dean on the line still, I believe. Kelly, you want to call us off?
Yep, Waller,
yes,
Welcome,
Yes,
Moyer,
yes,
Woodley,
Yes,
Whitmire,
Yes.
Solomon, yes, Duran.
Yes,
thank you.
thanks. I appreciate, this is, obviously, we know this is difficult. I only have reference from the private sector where wages are creeping and creeping and creeping, and you still have a hard time finding people. So I hope this makes a difference and catches a category of candidates that was maybe aware of the position, but just couldn't do that. So thank you for all that work. And that was our general business 3. We have the donations before us. So we have a resolution to approve the donations. I'm trying to make them bigger so I can read them. Okay, so we have to the library, $25 in memory of Bill Hansen by Dave Kennebeck, $25 in memory of Nick Marks by Friends of the Library, $200 to the Wabasha Main Street program, or from the to the Wabasha Main Street program from Art in the Park grant balance, and for downtown decorations, $250 by Excel Energy. Do we have a motion to approve the donations?
I move.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
Thanks, Brian. We have motion and a second. Any further discussion, or we'll take a roll vote, and then we'll have an opportunity to adjourn.
Yes, Whitmire,
Yes.
Woodley,
yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Baldwin,
Yes.
Grant.
Yes. Do we have any other announcements? Thanks,
So,
everybody, for this
Board of Appeal,
Board of Appeal.
appeal equalization.
Oh,
So who's on that this year?
Good
It's
one.
my turn.
My turn?
yes, it's your turn. I've been on for 4 years.
I
was on it for like,
I did the training too, and I got it to Wendy, so
Okay, then you're up.
I'm off the
Very
hook.
we
good.
got
I need
first ward,
one from each ward.
right, so first ward, second ward, who's third ward?
Sullivan Memorial.
Jeff, you've done it like the last 3 years, haven't
Last year.
I'll do it again.
Dean will do it again, and Wendy will follow up if he needs training. All right, do we
And
have
I got training done too. so.
any other announcements?